Hello, everybody. Today, we're going to focus on cloud MAP deployment. We have talked a lot on HSG deployment and configuration, and today we're going to focus on our mBox access point. So there are two parts for this webinar. First, we're going to talk about the deployment scenario. Then we're going to talk about the deployment steps, followed by a live demo. The MAP can be deployed in two kind of typical environments. One is a private enterprise Wi-Fi. Private enterprise Wi-Fi is really for like office environment or for campus school networks where Wi-Fi is secured with a pre-shared key or by username and password. Pre-shared key is basically using WPA2 and pre-shared key. That means before you can connect to the Wi-Fi or while you're trying to associate to the Wi-Fi, the Wi-Fi level, you authenticate you and make sure you have the right credential, either with a pre-shared key or with a username password, which is using .1x, AO2.1x authentication. We're going to go through the scenario in more details later. Another environment that we typically deploy is in public hotspots. Public hotspots are really places like shopping malls, cafes, F&Bs, tourism places, or airports where the Wi-Fi is open. You can straight away associate to the Wi-Fi, and the authentication is done by the capture portal. That means you will typically be required to log into a capture portal, and upon entering correct credential, you will be given full access. So the difference is the capture portal doing authentication gives the venue owner flexibility to flash their branding or advertising. And enterprise Wi-Fi is secure at the Wi-Fi level. There's really very little user engagement, but it's more seamless for user to log in because they don't have to go through the step of entering another level of password at the portal, especially the first time after they put in a pre-shared key or username password, if for the case of enterprise, then the device will store or remember the credentials. So the next time when they try to reconnect, you will be seamless. So for secure Wi-Fi deployment or the enterprise Wi-Fi deployment using pre-shared key, for cloud deployment, you have the AP sitting in any remote location in the offices, customer. This is a typical customer network where you have router and MAP, which the MAP most likely will get IP address from the router or firewall. And then once it gets IP address with internet access, you will automatically register with our Cloud MACC. Cloud MACC stands for MAP Cloud Controller. So which is a part of our mFusion module and it's multi-tenanted. So which means if you are a reseller or partner, when you log into the MACC, you will be able to manage for all your customers, entities, and also their APs. And you can also create accounts for each customer to log into the MACC so that they can view and even potentially manage their own APs. So there's a hierarchy or multi-tenancy within the MACC, and each customer is restricted to see their own APs, and being a reseller, you can manage all other customers and different entities. So the AP can be provisioned and managed centrally from the MACC. Within MACC, you can configure multiple templates, and each time you can push the same template config to many different APs. So all the AP will have this same configuration and settings. Then you don't have to go to each AP to modify or change any configuration. So the template defines all the Wi-Fi settings. And AP, basically, you will just add the AP serial number into each individual entity or other targeted entity, which is associated to a configuration template. And there's some advanced feature, radio management, client roaming, are all configured under the MACC. So for the case of pre-shared key, you really just need to create a template and with the SSID and Wi-Fi password, And most of the time, your VLAN ID will be just one if there's only one SSID. But if you have multiple SSID, then you will map each SSID to its specific VLAN, which means also that your PoE switch need to support trunking in order to trunk multiple VLANs. Then on the user level, they really just have to, once they associate to the Wi-Fi, they just have to enter a Wi-Fi password. This is the simplest way of giving enterprise access, and configuration-wise, it's also very simple. So another more sophisticated enterprise Wi-Fi mode is the provisioning of the AP is the same. Once AP gets internet access with a DHCP permitted by the firewall or router, you would auto-register with the cloud MACC. Under the template configuration, you will enable WPA to enterprise and also configure a reader server for the authentication of the user. In this case, the MACC will ask the external reader server to validate user credential when they try to hook onto the Wi-Fi, when they try to authenticate with the Wi-Fi. The readers can be part of the mFusion or can be external reader server, external customer reader server. For example, your LDAP running reader service to authenticate enterprise user using their corporate account. For public hotspots deployment with captive portal, there are two ways of serving captive portal. One is to use local HSG. You place a local HSG, which will act as a router, firewall, captive portal server with CMS, and hotspot controller, which does all the bandwidth control and time and session control. And it's also local reader server and monetizations gateway. So the HSG will basically take care of everything, and only the AP will be managed by the cloud controller. Just bear in mind that the mBox HSG can also have its own local wireless controller, that means MACC. So the mBox comes with a MACC module as well, so the MAP can be managed by the local MACC within the HSG as well. But since we're talking about cloud MAP in this topic, so the MAP will be managed by the cloud MACC here, and everything else is done by the local HSG. In this case, the Wi-Fi will be an open Wi-Fi, and you will basically have that HSGs to do everything else. Then when we use the captive portal with using cloud HSG, so that means you will have a cloud HSG hosted in your data center or in a customer data center, and the AP can be in the remote location and managed by the cloud MACC here. So the MACC basically will manage the AP configuration, and the MAP will point to the central HSG for captive portal authentication and Wi-Fi monetization. So this is typically useful for F&Bs or retail outlets where you can centrally host one HSG to serve all the remote locations. And this is typically for shopping malls or on-premise deployments. So in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to do a live demo on how to provision or the configuration, the deployment steps. So if you're a customer or if you're a partner with many customers under you and you're now trying to provision for a customer under this scenario, this demo, we're going to elaborate on the enterprise Wi-Fi. So if you're a partner, you will have access to the admin tab, and where you can create your new customer entity. So I'm going to create a customer entity called test MAP lab. So once you create it, you can continue to create user accounts for this entity, let's say MAP lab, so that later they can log in to view the AP operating status, but that's not the focus. Let's say we just skip that one for now. And once you have provisioned the entity, and if you go to the MACC module under planning location, you will see that new entity appear here. Then if you follow the steps in the diagram here, so you basically configure customer organizations. So let's say now we're going to provision a customer organization, let's say POC or demo. Once you have configured that location, you're ready to add APs. Okay, so you can make more interesting, visual effect. For example, you can have say, okay, this organization sits in somewhere in Singapore, or you can put in the postal code. And once you are done with the entity provisioning, you just add the APs into it. So I have an AP here in my lab on my desk. So you have the console connecting to it, and another one basically connecting to an office network with DHCP. So it already has internet access. So if you console to it, to pin MACC, and you can pin, that means you already have internet access and it's ready to register. If it's a new fresh AP, you should already have all the necessary default config for it to register with the cloud MACC. In case it has been used before, so what you do is you just have to run the command config delete. That means you delete the existing configs. So you just follow the command to delete that. I won't be doing that in this lab because it takes quite a bit of time to pull the default config later if I flash everything now. So once you have flashed the box, the AP, then you will just copy down go to our online documentation, search bootstrap, and you just copy the default config, which is already exists in AP if it's never been used. Unless it's been used, you delete the default config and you copy this setting and you paste, you go to config terminal and you paste that setting onto the command line interface. So once you paste that, then you capture the AP's serial number, which is on the physical box as well. So if it is first time deploying the AP, you really don't have to do anything on the console, on the command line. All you need to do is look at the AP. There's a serial number here. Okay, just copy the serial number. And after you have already provisioned the entity and organization, all you need to do is just to paste the serial number or add the serial number here. So if you have a list of AP, many APs, and you can normally get the serial number from the inventory list. So all you need to do is really just to import the serial number, and that's all. Okay, the command line is basically for you to do a lot more extra interesting stuff. But as far as the default config for most of the 90% of the scenario, all you need to do is after you provision the entity, you just put in the serial number here, okay, which is already on the physical box. So you don't really have to do anything on the box, on the AP box. So the next is to prepare the template. So you can add a new template, and which I've already add one here, and you can give a name to the template, and you give a configure an SSID. And for this live demo, I'm going to use the .1x authentication, which is WPA2 Enterprise. And I'm just going to bridge to 1. That means you would just, the Wi-Fi user will just join the office LAN network, getting DHCP from the same DHCP server that all the LAN users are getting. So the key part is really the reader server. You have to define reader server. If it's not listed here yet, you can click to add the reader server IP and the pre-share key, and make sure the remote reader server are also adding the MACC as a Redis client with the same pre-share key, so that when MACC sends the authentication request to the Redis server, this Redis server will honor the request and start to authenticate users. So, which I've already done that configuration for the Redis. You just need to select the Redis server, and if you are using let's say if you are using our cloud Redis, which is in the same box as the MACC, so you really just have to add as a local Redis server. You still have to add one here. Just put as local Redis IP address, or put the Redis public IP address as well. So once you're done with that, then you just save, and the rest can just leave as default. You can enable some API client isolation features if you want. Then once you're done with the template, you go to setting, select the target organization, which is under the entity that you just provisioned for this new customer, and you apply this template and save. So once you have applied the setting, you'll start to push the configuration. Because for the cloud MAP deployment, the AP actually every 60 seconds or 30 seconds, whichever you have defined here, you will try to get in touch with the MACC to pull the configuration and also sends update. So the setting can, the push down of the configuration can take a little bit of time, but it doesn't mean the system is slow. It's just the way it works, because the MACC doesn't proactively push down configuration to the AP. The setting or configuration updates and pulling of the config is all initiated from the AP, and which initiates, gets update every 60 seconds. So you can check the status of the progress, and you can go to the logs and look at the progress, how the configuration has been pushed down, and it's been there are a lot of settings that we need to push down. Although from a template level, it seems to be pretty straightforward to configure, but really there's a lot of settings in there, and which is just that we have the UI simplified for you. So meanwhile, you can start to monitor the AP status, and it is already online now. So that means the AP is able to join the MACC group, and also it's been recognized, and it's ready to push configuration. It's ready to pull the configuration from MACC, and it's just that config is not synced yet, config status. So we just wait for the config to sync. And sometimes if you want to speed up the progress, so you can actually, because by default, the timer is 60 seconds. So you can make it shorter, which I already made it short. So you can make it to 30 seconds, which is the minimum, the shortest time you can ever configure. So right now it's really doing fine. So we just wait a little bit longer for the AP to pull the configuration completely. So once it pulls the configuration, then we can do a live test. So remember, we are using the WPA2 enterprise authentication mode. So that means using the L2.1x authentication, and we're using a Redis to do the authentication, external Redis. So it's actually an IP address that's really part of the mFusion module. So it's really the other module of the cloud system. So what I'll do is I will create a user account now to for later authentication purpose. So let's say MAP lab demo, MAP demo, and I'll use the same password as MAP demo. So later we can try to log in using this password, so whether it works. So it takes a while for the SSID and everything to be pushed. And because I have already done this setup earlier, and so the configuration is actually already pushed down to the MAP. If you look at the configuration, the AAA and everything is already there. So I can already start to do the test. But if you're first time doing this setup, you just have to wait for the whole config syncing to be completed so that you can do the actual test. And for now, we can already do the test because AP was already set up, although it is trying to sync the config now because I made some slight change just now. But the config is the same. I just changed the group. So the AP is already actually up and running. So I'm going to do a live demo. Just to check the SSID, which is mBox.1x. So we're going to, somehow there is one. Okay, so we still have to wait for the config to fully sync because it's supposed to be secured. Somehow my phone is detecting it's not secured. So we're just going to wait a little bit longer, and that's basically the way it is. So now we check the configuration syncing status. Still in progress. However, we have already got the SSID apply being pushed and SSID authentication being pushed. So the rest are some other optional parameter. So for the purpose of this live demo, I think we have really got what we need, the SSID and SSID authentication. So I'm just going to go back to do the testing again. So the SSID is there now, the mBox.1x. So you'll be asked to enter username, password. Username is MAP test, so MAP demo. And password, we also used MAP demo. That's what we created in the Redis. And straight away, I'm connected. And if you go back to the Redis to check the access logs, access attempts, MAP demo. So there was a record for the authentication just now. So that's pretty much all for the .1x authentication. And if you look at it, it's really very simple. Just recap, you provision the customer entity and you bootstrap the AP, optional. This is again optional. If you are doing new deployments, the AP should have ready or the default config been deployed. And you just have to make sure the AP has the necessary internet access. Then you provision the template and you apply the template to the entity. Then in our next lab, we're going to talk about the advanced radio management and some of the advanced Wi-Fi features. That's pretty much all for today. And thanks again for watching. I look forward to seeing you again next week.